So the Lando Norris video generated quite a few reactions. It is, in my opinion, a very interesting video because it talks about a topic that, in my opinion, has a lot of misconceptions regarding how to set up the pedals in sim racing, what is deemed to be immersive, or what is deemed to be realistic. Since I was going to the 24 hours of Spa, I had the idea to talk with some GT3 drivers that were racing there regarding this same topic.
So everyone has a huge discussion about sim racing pedals, you know. A big misconception is that the pedal has to be super stiff. But if you watch if there is a pedal cam in the real car, it actually looks quite soft. Even though we're pushing like 80 bar, 120 bar, depending on the car that you're racing. Like a Ferrari's around 80 bar, 80, 90 bar. But what people don't realize is that when you're in a real racing car and you press the brake, you also have G-force that is kind of pushing you into the brake.
In terms of my pedals and the way I set them up, in the sim versus real life, it's actually quite different because on the simulator you're using a load cell on most pedals, I would say. At least in the mid-range to higher end pedals, it's a load cell, let's say hardware. And you want like a very, very fine amount of precision when you're hitting the brake pedal. So when you hit the brake, you're not looking for a massive pressure. You're looking for accuracy in terms of hitting a specific number, like a value. So I'm looking for percentages. You know, let's say I need an 80% threshold. There's an actual ceiling on 100% brake pressure and 0%. So there's actually a window you play within. Whereas in the real car, you can basically push the pedal endlessly with like as much pressure as you can physically put in. Like, I don't know, 200 bar of pressure if you can push it on the pedal.
The brake, it's hard to compare whether it's stiffer or not. I don't think it is stiffer, but I can achieve more pressure in the car than I can on my rig because of the G-force. So I'll be thrown forward in the car and I can get 130 bar, whereas at home I get nowhere near that.
In the real car, I'm never thinking about like what percentage I need to hit, which is kind of crazy. Like, I do everything by feel. Based on how the car is decelerating and depth perception, judging the speed I'm coming into the corner, how quickly I'm approaching the apex. So it's a lot of, I would say initially it's the feeling that you get from the seat of your pants because you're sitting on your butt, and your butt is the first point of contact on the car. And you kind of feel the car moving underneath you, and you feel the deceleration Gs. With your eyes, you kind of detect the track coming towards you. So I would never say I'm like thinking, oh, I'm going to brake at 60% here. I more so give, you know, it's very funny, I've never thought about that. I just put my foot on the pedal and I feel the deceleration.
Yeah.
And I use a reference point, so it's almost like you pick a reference point, you pick a specific pressure that you're applying, like a weight, I would say. It's more weighted rather than percentage. So it's a brake marker, that's always the first point that you start with because that's a constant. And then the variables are, well, your constants are your brake point, your brake pressure, or the peak application weight in your foot, and then the variables, which is how you manipulate the car, and actually probably is the biggest differentiator between a good driver and a great driver is how you release off of peak pressure and roll the car into the corner to achieve maximum entry and apex speed with rotation.
Overall, they're not too different. I mean, I actually really like the Heising belts more so than the McLaren pedals, but you're stuck with what you're given, and I can still drive the car very consistently and well.
I try to make it similar, not so similar, because I mean in the car when you brake you have the G-force that helps you to brake harder, so I don't like to make it like so hard pedal-wise. So they're similar but not like hard as the real car, because also when I drive I don't want to be so exhausted as the real car. So I mean, you can make it pretty much as you want, so I try to make it as close as possible, yes.
In the sim, you're using a lot of visuals, and in real life, you're using a lot of feeling from the seat of your pants. So although there's a lot of similarities in what you need to do, hitting percentages in real life, also on the sim, there's a disconnect, for lack of better words, when you're on the sim versus real life. On my sim, I use the pad of my foot. I'm using very soft pressures, very small movements in the pedal, not really big travel. In my real car, there's actually a really large range of travel, and you can push the pedal really, really hard, and you get that physical feedback in real life.
My setup at home is actually quite a soft pedal. Like, I just want some modulation with my ankle, to be able to modulate with my ankle. but I still push with my leg.
Yeah.
If I run it too stiff in the sim, I can't modulate like I do in real life, and I feel so much slower. So for me, it's ideal if you only need to push around 30 to 40 bar at home. Whereas I have some friends who like that you have to push 80 bar.
Yeah.
But we don't, the style when you're sitting at home on a set of pedals, when you push 80 bar at home without the G-force, it's such a different way, it's such a different way of braking. So it's something that I always have an argument about with people. I always argue with people about sim racing versus real racing, but I pay so much attention to these things because I use, like I had a big issue in real life with braking. Like a big issue. Like I wasn't reaching a peak, like the brake shape needs to be like super high and then trail off. Mine had like this like weird slope at the beginning, and I wasn't modulating well in that final like 3-4% when you come off. And I fixed that in the sim with a relatively soft brake pedal, because the more sensitive I got on a soft brake pedal, the better I was able to control a stiffer pedal, if it makes sense. I just gained sensitivity with my left foot.
So I sort of run the Heisenbergs like default, and the travel in the brakes the same.
Really?
In the throttle, I think it's slightly longer in the car, which is, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't like it too long because then you're really tricky to get the right amount. The clutch is the same. The brake, the difference is you've got ABS and it's inbuilt into the brake system, whereas on the sim, the ABS is in game, so you can't feel the ABS on your foot, whereas on the real car you can, so it does feel different.
I personally don't add more travel in my sim rig. I feel like the more travel you have, the softer the setup needs to be, and the softer the setup is, the more I would say inaccuracy creeps in, because the softer like the rubbers or the polymers are, the more inconsistency there is in the pedal application. So if you're looking to achieve a 62% pressure application on peak force, it's really hard to achieve 62%. Whereas with the stiff pedal, it's very, very precise, and it's, I would say, sharper to get to certain values. So for me, I personally prefer a stiff pedal with short travel and using more pressure rather than travel.
You can do pretty much everything with my pedals. You have the software that you can make harder, softer, travel longer and shorter. So, I mean, if maybe you drive in MG and you have a longer travel paddle, you can do it longer. If you have, I don't know, F1 that is shorter, you can do shorter.
I once injured my left foot very badly in training. I just sprained it when I was running, and I had to go to right foot braking for about 2 months, which wasn't natural to me. A lot of GT drivers still right foot brake, and I used the sim to learn how to right foot brake properly, you know, with like at a peak performance. And it also taught me, like right foot braking taught me how to be better at fuel consumption, because in like Le Mans, it's super important to be better on fuel consumption. So the right foot braking taught me you can still be fast with like a transition, like you come off the throttle and then you brake.
Yeah.
That came from the sim with sim racing pedals.
Main stuff, what I need in simulator is pedals, as every time I say it, because it's where you drive the car for me. If you have a good technique in braking, you can be really quick. I always suggest my friend when they ask me I need a good pedal or a good steering wheel, even if you don't have a direct drive, for me it's kind of okay, but you really need a good pedal. I have my Eisenquert Ultimate, so I'm happy with it, and it's quite fun when I'm at home and to drive.
So a big thank you to all the drivers that took the time before the race for this interview. So from what you can see on this video, all the drivers have the same idea of what they're using in the car. It doesn't really represent or can be transferred one-to-one in regards to sim racing. They have very different approaches on how to set up their sims at home. Based on their experiences and their knowledge, there isn't really a one-to-one representation between sim racing and real life, because, you know, the physical mediums are completely different, and the way we have the information between the car and the sim rig is totally different. So, you know, everything needs to be adapted to that. Sim racing can get close in a lot of areas, including pedals, but in reality, there isn't really a need for them to have the brake pedal operate in the same way in the sim as they do it in the car, because you know what? Sometimes they don't really want to get exhausted while sim racing, and of course, they don't have the G-force brake assist. So you really don't need to set up your pedals with the minimum amount of distance possible, because that's not really what they have in the cars anyways. You should set up your sim rig and your sim pedals in the way it's best for you.